Good morning, book nerd friends. It's Ellie here, and it is time for my second book review. I am so excited to chat with you guys today about this title that I will share in just a moment. I do want to apologize in advance if you hear any background noise. It's very, very windy where I live today, and I have a tin roof, so you can hear pretty much every gust of wind that comes by my house. So apologies in advance for that. Just bear with me, and let's talk about a very great book today. So today I am reviewing the novel The Picture of Dorian Gray by author Oscar Wilde. This was published in the late 19th century, and it's a very popular classic, which is why it ended up on my TBR in the first place. I love classical novels, so I was excited to explore this very popular title. Overall, I would give this book 3 stars. So I'll dive in a little later in this video into what I liked about it and what I didn't. But first I'll give you guys a quick synopsis. So this book follows a young man named Mr. Dorian Gray. It starts when he's very young, probably late teens. I don't know exactly how old he's supposed to be. I didn't look that up or anything. I would assume late teenager. He meets Mr. Basil Hallward and Lord Henry Wotton, who become friends with him and lead him into some choices that maybe aren't the best for him to be making. Mr. Basil Hallward is an artist, and the novel begins with him painting a portrait of Dorian. So Dorian is known for being very lovely, but he's also very young and very impressionable. So the friends that Dorian chooses greatly influence the path of his life throughout the novel. And that begins when he meets Lord Henry Wotton, who becomes one of his best friends, but isn't necessarily the most well-advised friend for the young and impressionable Dorian. So this book follows Dorian's life over the course of probably 10 to 12 years. I don't know exactly how long it's supposed to last, but it goes from him being a very young man to probably in his mid-30s. This book, it hops around in time quite a bit, so you're not seeing every aspect of his life through those years, but you see some of the major choices he makes, some of the relationships he forms and then loses over those years. Some of them better than others, some of them more meaningful, and some of them have worse endings than others. I wouldn't say any of those friendships that he makes in the novel have great endings, but anyway, some of them end up better than others for the people that he's friends with. Really, the main impressions that this book gave me were that none of us are impervious to the influence of the people around us. So it's very important that we choose our friends wisely, which is something that Dorian does not do well in this novel. He chooses friends based on who is flattering him, who makes him happiest, and who supports his own wants and decisions. He chooses friends very selfishly and for very shallow reasons, let's put it that way. But he's also I've used the word impressionable several times, and I'll continue to use that because that's the word that comes to mind when I think of Dorian. He's a very impressionable young man. So the friends that he surrounds himself with have a great influence on him. When the beginning of the book, Dorian is seen as this very promising young man with a bright future ahead of him. Everyone around him is telling him all the great things that he has in store, all the great things that are coming for him in his life. And understandably, this begins to swell his head. He's known to be very young and very beautiful and have a great future ahead of him. And he starts to think that nothing can touch him. He can do whatever he wants. And it's pretty clear from the way that he treats other people, the way that he thinks about himself and talks about himself, that he thinks that he can get away with anything. And he lives that way for a very long time, for a long period of years. He pretty much does whatever he wants, whenever he wants. He treats people however he wants to. He doesn't value the people around him very much. He only sees them for what they can give him. So for a while, he gets away with this. He's able to do whatever he wants, but then eventually in the end of the novel, his choices, they catch up to him, and he has some pretty big skeletons in his closet that, we see throughout the book as the readers, but aren't revealed to the people around him until the end of the novel. So overall, this is an interesting read. It's very thought-provoking. I did enjoy it. I would not say this is, a favorite book of mine or even a favorite classic. I have enjoyed many other classics a lot more, I'll put it that way, but I definitely think it is worth a read. So some of the impressions this book left me with, I already talked a little bit about how the people around us shape us, but another big impression that this book left me with was that the choices we make and the things we think even about ourselves and about the people around us, the way we view relationships, those shape our minds and hearts and souls. and none of us can escape the choices we've made. You know, obviously as a Christian, I believe there is forgiveness for sin, and you know, we don't have to be tied down by the burdens of our past, but this book does point out, you know, in a very realistic way that none of us, you know, can live without consequences. The choices we make, the way we choose to treat people, those things will, you know, they follow us. And Dorian gets a reputation throughout this book from the choices he makes. And I won't give away any spoilers, but some of the choices he makes and the way he treats people is less than ideal. Let's put it that way. And he becomes known to others as someone who is not the best friend to have. But more so than that, it starts to, for lack of a better word, decay his own heart and mind. He steadily becomes a darker character throughout the book. He becomes less caring, more selfish, and he thinks he's invincible, which is a dangerous thing for any of us to think, right? But I do think it was a very interesting commentary, the whole book. It was a very interesting commentary on how our choices of friends, of actions, of values, how all those things shape us as people and shape the path that our lives go on. So I think there was some very interesting moral messaging in this book, and that was one thing I enjoyed. I also really enjoyed the writing style. It was very poetic and very descriptive, and that was something that I thought was beautiful, and I did enjoy that about this novel. Some things I enjoyed a little bit less. As I've mentioned and made pretty clear throughout this, the main character is more of a dark character, and I'm okay with that. I think that's an interesting thing. I think it makes the novel interesting. It's not like some other classical novels, which may be lighter reads or maybe romance focused, and I enjoy that kind of thing, but this was a deviation from that. But what I did not enjoy is that there were no other characters in the book that showed the lighter side of human nature, if that makes sense. You know, I'm okay with the main character being darker. That doesn't really bother me. But I like to have, well, let's say I enjoy books more when there's at least one character I can look up to or relate to or see as, like, you know, somewhat admirable or at least acceptable. But there was no one in this book that really stood out to me as, like, that's a really great character. So I do think that was something that detracted from the book. It was very focused on the darker side of human nature and the flaws that we can have as people and the mistakes we can make. And again, while I'm okay with that in the main character, I would have liked to see a foil of that and having one character at least, even if they're a minor character, that was showing a better way, I guess, for lack of a better word. So that was something I enjoyed a little less. Overall, this wasn't like a fun or light or easy read. It was an easy read, but it wasn't like a fun or light read. It was definitely worth reading, though. It was very thought-provoking. It had some interesting moral messaging, as I've said before, and I definitely think it is worth a read if you like classics. If you like darker main characters, morally gray characters, anything like that, this is a good book for you. If you're a classic reader, I would definitely check it out. It's a pretty short book. It only took me a couple days to read, so I think it's definitely worth looking at. It's a good read. Overall, 3 stars. Have you read this book? And if you have, did you enjoy it? I would say I enjoyed it, but probably not a favorite. Alright, those are my overall impressions of The Picture of Dorian Gray. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. I kept it a little bit shorter than last week's review, so I hope maybe this is a little bit more of a watchable video. It doesn't take quite so much of your time. But I thank you guys for staying here and watching this and listening to my thoughts on a book I've read. I enjoy sharing my thoughts and opinions on my books, so I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch, and I hope you'll come back next week. I'll announce in a day or two the book I'll be reviewing next weekend, so stay tuned for that, and let me know your thoughts on this book in the comments section. Alright, see you guys later. Thanks!